All right, so we are going to go, this is the Manners Group class online webinar. The format is pretty easy. We're going to be going through just showing some video and implementing and being able to talk a little bit about each of the training that we do with some of the school dogs. This webinar is for, I've got one client that just got her puppy last night. So I went over this this afternoon at 1 o'clock and saw her puppy. I mean, just, you know, brand new and everything everything's new. It's also this particular class, we're talking to dogs that are not necessarily reactive. They're dogs that are progressing their way into going into like the CGC prep course. So I'm going to talk, let me go ahead and share my screen. Oops, before I do that, we're going to go here. And we're going to share. So this will be available for anyone in our private group page. And it will be streaming live. All right. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen so that we can go through the webinar together. As soon as I can find that. You do have access to just asking any questions like on Zoom. I like the platform Zoom because I can talk right to you and we can record and share the screen. Let's see. So class is going to be about 45 to 50 minutes. There is the ability to actually raise your hand. There's a button there that you can raise your hand if you have a quick question. You can also chat. Anything that you do put in writing, I'm going to look at the very end and then spend about 10 to 15 minutes answering any of your questions. If we run out of time, then I'll just take those questions. It allows me to save them and then I'll kind of bring it together with the training team and we can answer them together. Class will be recorded so that you can watch it again. There's going to be some videos that I've embedded into the keynotes so that you can take a look at them later. We're going to be looking at settle on a mat versus place, problem prevention. We're going to discuss training environments, mental enrichment. So I've got a few brain games, introduction to play, as well as breed specific play. It's been a long day. Management, socialization. I'm going to show you some video on how to expose your dog safely to a crate, but you can take that same concept and you can expose to anything new. So for example, we did shoot some video today of exposure to a harness. Then we're going to show you the importance of using a clicker and like why we use it and love it. The new behavior today, or the today that we're going to focus on, is loose leash walking, because that's a big thing. And in this class, we're going to talk about puppy empowerment training versus behavior adjustment training. So in the puppy empowerment training, we're still using the same kind of long leash, so some of the same tools that you use in the other program. Problem prevention today, I've got a really cute video for counter surfing, and then at the very end, we'll do some questions and answers. So again, if you have any quick questions, you can chat with me. Other than that, I will just kind of go through the list of what we're talking about. So, let's see. So to start, we talk about the environment, and a lot of people want to be able to take their dog out on the road, and that's one of the first questions I ask is, your dog, you know, going to be in the house like a house pet? Do you want to take the dog out like every once in a while? Or are you really planning on taking your dog everywhere and anywhere, like 2nd Street and Main Street? Do you want to be able to work in a hospital or work? We've got 2 or 3 clients that their goal is to do therapy work in a classroom with kids. So we're already exposing, you know, at a young age, we're going to begin exposing those dogs that are going into that kind of program in the future. We're exposing them to sounds and children at a very young age. If your goal is just to have a well-mannered pet at home and you never really take your dog out on the road, you don't go on vacation and stuff, but they do just want to go out for a walk, there's just different skill levels that we have to go through as far as training goes. So I just wanted to touch bases, like when it comes to talking about what level of training, it does take a lot of work to have a dog that can be okay with all the different environments, like Second Street and Main Street. So environments, how we work environments in our school program, we'll typically start, we like to start in the person's home, and we do all of the beginning training at home. And that's because there's less distractions, and we don't just like go anywhere in the house. We normally stick with just one area of the house that the dog is comfortable in. And then after they're okay with that level, then we start to generalize that new behavior, and we might use the backyard, the front yard. And then I'll tell them, hey, how about going over, 2 houses down? So it's usually a quiet neighborhood before we go out to a public park. And if we do go to a public park, you would start off with dogs that are not in the area. That's kind of like where we do our training now. We'll start off with a public park, but there's really not a lot of things going on. But for some dogs, just being outside is really challenging. So then we would need to scale it back down. After we're able to go into a public park, then we start to work things like Home Depot, the pet store, as long as there's not a lot of dogs going in there. And then we go into higher populated areas like Marshall's or Ross we went into the other day, and it was pretty busy. Before we go on to Main Street or Ocean Boulevard, those are the different levels of training of the same behavior that we have to go through. So one of the biggest things that a lot of clients will say is like, hey, my dog does really well in the home, but then I took over to Dog Beach and my dog won't recall to me. So we like to basically explain our process in training, where we're changing the environment each time, progressively going up with that same behavior, so that they understand, like, you can't take, you're not going to be as successful if you start by training your dog in your home and then you immediately take them out, somewhere in public. They're not going to listen because it's a new environment. So we have to expose them to the environment first, then we can begin implementing training. So here are some videos of us doing some training in, I guess this is in someone's backyard, and then this is over here at Home Depot. Mental enrichment, we always talk about, we've got a lot of smart dogs in our program, and we talk about how we have to mentally drain them. You have to let your dogs like get mentally challenged just so that they can come down a notch. Always stressing so much exercise just makes them a better athlete. So we really highly recommend implementing some of their mental stimulation. We like to do new puzzles, and I'm going to go over a few different type of puzzles that you can do in your home. And if you've had privates with me, you've probably heard all of this, but just in case, I'm going to repeat it. But we like to take that puzzle, and when we're exposing a dog to a new room, like this morning or this afternoon, we had a dog that was really scared of being around their crate. So their play time and their puzzle time was all done near that crate, not right next to it, but close by in the same room. So we're exposing using something that a lot of dogs love, which is usually their feeding time. There's lots of different kinds. So how we progress with our school program is that we start off with something very easy. So like a licky mat or a snuffle mat. That's a good way to start off using mental enrichment feeders or interactive feeders. They're called lots of different things. You want to start off really easy and then progressively make it harder and harder. To make it harder, you're going to see in the example that I show you a little bit later, you're going to show like the box flaps will start to, be added. If you don't mentally stimulate your dog and you don't drain them a little bit with their physical and mental exercise, what you're going to find is your dog is constantly needy. That's where you get dogs that are frustrated, they start digging, they get bored, or they just like randomly go in the trash can and, you know, and then you're like, well, what happened? You go, okay, they really didn't get a lot of mental stimulation. That could be a reason why they're acting a little cuckoo these days. So here is a do-it-yourself enrichment. We call this the burrito, but basically you're taking their kibble combined with, sometimes we like to add a few treats to make it more of like a wow, cool experience. And you just put a few pieces along the flap and then you fold it. And the tighter the burrito is, the harder it is. So for like a brand new puppy that's never done this before, thing is long, we might just put one row and do one flap over and then present it to the dog. Again, where you present it is going to help expose that dog positively to a room or an area. So this is taking, there it is. Okay, so here's a little fast video of what we would do. So this is a pretty tight roll. And when you give your dog an enrichment feeder of some kind, you want to see what they use. Do they use their nose? Do they pick up with their teeth? Do they use their paws? A dog that's building confidence is going to try a little bit of everything. So we'll typically say some dogs will smell and then they'll kind of get curious and push it with their nose. Some dogs will like put their paw on it and then push with their nose. So that's pretty creative. You'll see even some dogs hold the interactive feeder with their paws and then start to chew. And then some dogs pick it up with their teeth and then rattle it all up, right? This one is the muffin tin. We like to kind of do, you know, some jackpots. So you're going to put some higher reinforcements along with their kibble. Now this one's a little more challenging because we've added toys on top. Some of the toys are stuffed in there, so they have to use their teeth to pick that up. And you just present it like you would a food bowl. And it just kind of makes, you know, feeding time a lot more fun, gives them some mental stimulation. They're using all the different paws, their teeth, and their nose to search. Some dogs will actually take the muffin tin and then they'll, you know, dump it all the way over. And I say, oh, that's a pretty smart dog. Here's the box game. So we have one dog in our Rowdy Rover class that is training to be a diabetic alert. So we talked about increasing the ability to smell so that she can come into a room and actually start to use her nose. So using something like the box game, where you're simply using like your Amazon boxes, and first you might expose them, you know, so that they're not scared. You might just present it in the middle of the room and put food around it, not necessarily inside. But eventually you're going to place the food or their treats inside the box, and you might just leave it completely open. And then, you know, after a few repetitions, you can close one flap, two flaps, three flaps, and all four. And you might even seal it closed. After that, if they get really good at that, you can add things on top. So then it helps with their problem solving skills. So now you've got a dog that can not only use their nose and their paws, but they're actually thinking, how in the world do I remove this from there and move it over there? So it helps to improve their problem solving skills. So here we have like Bentley, I guess, just knocked it over, but some dogs would pick it all up and just kind of, you know, jump on it. So introduction to play. So we talked earlier about the importance of making sure that your dog has been socially, mentally and physically drained. So when you're first starting off, so this is the puppy that we met today. The puppy's actually a little bit terrified of people, you know, and they may not have been touched very much during the first few weeks. So we start off when we're talking about introduction to play, we usually start off with play with the human. So using your hands and using, you know, getting down on the dog's level. So you'll see in a second, you have a video of a dog that is the human is all the way down on her chest, and she is, she's actually, you know, using her hands, and she's acting kind of dog-like to get the dog to be comfortable with her. Once the dogs, during human play, there really shouldn't be any rules. You should learn what your dog's play style looks like, you know, what they might, you know, if they do a play bow, how their tail looks. It's great for bonding. It makes things fun. It kind of gets them out of their head. And it's a fun way to be silly because most of the time we're all so serious as humans. So it's a really fun way to just kind of get in and bond with your dog. So in this short video, this is an introduction to her just getting on the floor. You can see the puppy is kind of avoiding her, so she's staying down low. I had her use some of the dog's food, and you see the avoidance. See, the dog is really not interested at this time, but through patience. So we did this for about 3 or 4 minutes. We left for a few hours, and about an hour later, she sent me a video, and the dog actually ate from her hand. And it's mainly because she's down at the dog's level and she's not forcing. In this next video, you'll see me get down and I'm using a toy. So after we've done human play, we might introduce some toy. We start off with usually tug. And through play, we can teach lots of cool behaviors like get, drop, take, hold, and then a beginning of fetch. If you have a dog that is a terrier or a prey-driven dog or a herding dog, they're going to want to play with toys. So in the long run, like this dog on the bottom is JD when she was 9 weeks old. She prefers play over anything and everything. So rewards for her are always, almost always a toy. She can care less about food. So here we have a specific breed-specific play. So if you have a prey-driven dog, teaching them how to wait for the squirrel and then being released before they can go and chase the squirrel. And then once they do get the squirrel in their mouth, the behaviors that we incorporate, like with some of our dogs, is drop, right? Drop. For some dogs that might have some resource guarding, we might just do drop. And I've also taught like drop or settle, or drop, go to your place, or drop, back up, so that I can pick up the toy safely. So I love the flirt pole. We use this a lot in our school program. We've got like 5 or 6 of them with a bunch of different toys. I highly recommend if you live in an apartment or you just don't feel like, you know, chasing after a ball, this is a fun way to incorporate some of your play with training. I'm just going to touch lightly about management. We use management to stop unwanted behavior. So the crate is also a tool that we use for potty training, but a crate, an X-pen, tethering, play gates, those are all ways that you can stop unwanted behavior until the new behavior is trained. So if you have 4 dogs and you're adding an additional dog, and there's someone on here that I'm talking about, that additional dog can be put in an X or a crate or an X-pen so that the other dogs can get there and smell and be around them without causing any intimidation or just not, you know, having a bad experience for the puppy. So if you need help with understanding how management works, feel free to send us a message and we can kind of talk you through it if you don't quite have the understanding of it. We all talked about socialization and exposure to new objects. You know that the critical age for puppies, we usually say, is about 7 to 12 weeks, but some dogs go through another fear stage later on in life. Here are some of the list of things that we recommend exposing your dog to. If you haven't done so and your dog is beyond 12 weeks and you're noticing there's a little bit of a panic or just some stress signals when your dog hears a crying baby or hears, you know, racing motorcycle, that might be some things that you want to begin trying to use for your socialization training or exposure training. Here's a demonstration on how we expose a dog to a crate, a new puppy, but take this example and you can pretty much replace it with anything. So another video we shot was with the harness, how to expose a puppy to a harness, how to expose a puppy to a collar. Some dogs are afraid of a stainless steel water bowl. So the concept is the same for pretty much anything. Literally, we just like sit down next to the object, but not totally next to it, especially if the dog's already starting to hesitate. And we engage in something that the dog likes. So in this case, I think this is June. And yeah, this is June, and we're exposing her to the crate with toys and some of her kibble. So she's not throwing the toy or kibble in yet, but through play, it accidentally, you know, goes into the crate or goes next to the crate, and then you bring it back out. So here we're not forcing. We do have, sometimes when we're training, we have to keep the dog on leash just because then we can do more repetitions and we're kind of limited on time. So, and there she goes into the crate, and she did fine, and she came back out because the door is open. So not forcing her. Definitely don't put your dog in there and shut the door and wish everything goes well. So this is just an example of how we do exposure to something new. I'm going to go back to that. Okay. So one of the things in our Rowdy Rover class, we've got dogs that are sometimes afraid of change. So in this class, since your dogs are a little bit younger, I wanted to talk to you about what to do to prevent that fear that dogs have when they hear something new, or they see something new, or something's out of whack, or all of a sudden you've got people in your home, the things that you're not predicting, and then all of a sudden, you know, oh my God, there's like 20 people in my house. Or one dog that was a rescue, she might actually be on this call, was just, you know, all of a sudden had a party and had 30 people in the home, you know, 3 or 4 weeks after they brought the dog home. So that is pretty, it could go really bad for a dog that's not used to it. So exposing them early on to new things will really help dog get more comfortable with that going forward. And how we assess things. So I got a phone call, or got a message from one owner whose dog is pretty well trained, and then all of a sudden dog's starting to regress in training, and especially because it was kind of sudden. I wanted you guys to know the steps that we take in wondering what it could be. So typically we talk about, okay, maybe you need to check with your vet and make sure it's not a urinary tract infection. We've got dogs that have hurt their spine, their hips, maybe they've, you know, hurt their knee joint. So the dog is under stress, pain, or discomfort. So that can cause a dog's behavior to change a little bit, whether it's they start growling, or they don't want to do something, they regress in their training in some way. If you've been cleared with your vet check, and then we would talk about how much exercise mentally and physically is your dog getting? Are they getting what they need in order for them to be the dog that they are supposed to be? If so, once we've checked that off, we'll talk about what stages is your dog in. There's the fear imprint stage, and then some dogs go through a second fear period that they might be going through. If your dog's not spayed or neutered and it's that time, they might just have hormones that are causing discomfort and irritation and making the dog just not act like the normal self. If the stage is not a concern, then it might be there's a traumatic event or any recent changes. So we'll ask, like, is there construction going on in your neighborhood? Did anything happen? You know, do you have like guests in the house? Things like that can make a dog feel really uncomfortable and just kind of be a little off. And if all those things have been cleared, then we usually will evaluate the training program, and then we'll make some adjustments. So in this video, we shot a video of how to help your dog be okay with change. So the exposure is to, when the dog is not looking, we're going to surprise the dog. Now you'll see we start off with something very, very light. So don't start off with pots and pans. We have a little disc, you know, like one of those Bosu ball kind of discs. And we drop the disc on a very soft couch while the dog was not, you know, dog was busy chewing on something. Then we went into plastic, and then we went into a book. We want to see that maybe sometimes the dog looks and go, hey, what are you doing? And we use a cue that we learned from Nan Arthur, which I love. is we do the what was that? And it just means like, hey, we're playing that game. So then you can start making things a little bit louder and louder as the dog's progressing and doing okay with that. The other thing I like to do, which is really fun and it's just super simple, is that you put your dogs away and then you change up all the furniture and you throw things on the floor. In this case, we're using a vacuum and a broom. And then I was just trying to also expose them to these items. So I went ahead and throw some food down, and then we bring the dogs back in the room. When it's done like this, they're not only okay with change, they're actually embrace change because it means they're rewarded with some kind of food. So this vacuum obviously is not on, and you would do, you know, there's a way to expose your dog to a vacuum cleaner that's on, which is same as like exposing to a crate. It's done systematically, you know, one thing at a time at a certain distance, but we can talk about that later. Dogs are pretty easy. They, if you reinforce a good behavior, it's most likely going to keep repeating. So reinforcement is really important. In today's group class, this webinar, we're going to talk about the clicker. So the clicker is an acoustic sound. We use a clicker versus a verbal marker when we're teaching a brand new behavior. When paired up with food, it's more precise. So sometimes when I'm working with a client and I'm coaching them and they don't want to use a clicker and we're going to do a verbal marker, it works the same, the dog understands. But what happens is the verbal marker is changed all the time when it's transferred from one person to the other. So my verbal marker might be yes, and then I transfer to a client and they'll go yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it's just not consistent, where if you have a clicker, it's a very, very precise sound, and it can, like, I can actually give you the clicker and you can make the same sound. Now the clicker, there are some rules. It pretty much for us at Canine Learning Academy, we use the clicker and we pay with food. Some dogs that are not, you know, not using food, we can use the clicker for a different type of reinforcement. But when we're training a brand new behavior and we're shaping a new behavior, we're going to typically use food, and we're going to place the food treatment in different areas. The timing of the clicker is very precise. So in this little video, Laura is just showing that we first load the clicker. So when you first have a puppy and you want to use a clicker, and again, ask us, we'll kind of talk you through it or kind of do a demonstration with your dog. You're going to click and offer food. So nothing's moving, but the dog hears the sound and food appears. That's the very beginning of what we call loading the clicker. And then when we just start to pick a behavior, and usually you do about 60 seconds of this, you wait a couple hours and do it again. In this little short part of the video, we're showing different places that you can reinforce, like so you can reward your dog to the mouth if you're trying to bond. In this case, we were just doing kind of a little bit of a bucket game that we're doing later on. So Bentley is getting the click, but then the sound of the food going into the bowl is the reward. Notice that Laura is standing very, very still. So when we are teaching a brand new behavior, it's important to kind of be very, very still. So we usually bring our hands back to default position. So the new behavior today that we have gone through several times is our loose leash walking. In loose leash walking, there's lots of different steps, so I'm going to take you through all of them for today. This is a 6-minute video, but you're only going to do with your dog wherever you're at. So when we're using a clicker for loose leash walking, and we're going to walk the dog on the left-hand side, the handle of the leash is going to be in our right, and the clicker is also in the right. Placing our hand right under our chest, our belly button. We slide our food or our reinforcement on the same side of the dog. So if you're walking your dog on your left, your reinforcement's going to be on your left. And usually I'll slide it right behind my left glute. So like right behind my left hip. Treat size, you want them to be pretty small, like little pea size. You want to break them up before you begin. Very first step on loose leashing is you take a few steps and you just start clicking or marking. If you're not using a clicker, you're going to click, and then you're going to focus on where you're paying your dog. So you're going to focus on paying either behind the left knee or the right knee, depending on the size of your dog. Once your dog is understanding, hey, we're walking, then you're going to delay the click and wait for some eye contact and then click and pay. If you're losing your dog for a little bit, I highly recommend actually having the food already in your hand, not showing it, but paying them a little faster. So it's click, pay. Instead of going into your treat pouch, you could speed it up a little bit at the very beginning and then go back to just having them stay in that position. So here you see that I'm keeping my right hand pretty tight. I'm clicking, and then I'm paying right behind the left knee. And notice that my fingers are facing the dog's mouth. I'm not turning it all the way around. It's faced this way. So now we're getting a lot more duration on that eye contact. So we do this a few rounds. This is pretty much where most dogs stay for a long time, is we click for loose leash. If you started in your house, you might take this training with the, clicking for loose leash and clicking for eye contact into the backyard, the front yard, and then you can start implementing turns. So now on the next step, we wait till we turn, and if the dog turns, we turn as well. Click and then pay where you want the dog to be. Now, when you do make a turn, you want to turn away from the dog, not towards the dog. Towards the dog is the next step. So you do a lot of repetitions of away from your dog, click and treat, and then you can go into turning towards your dog. So this is step 3, is adding turns. So your dog's constantly following you. After we've gotten a lot of movement and the dog is following you, then we start to incorporate the sit. Now at the beginning, you can cue a sit. So you'll take a few steps, you'll say sit, but then you'll take maybe 2 more steps and then your feet go together. Do that like 2 or 3 times. So you'll say sit, step, step, click, treat. And then I release the dog. So I'm always saying, okay, or let's go. And eventually you can fade out the verbal cue. So the dog will go, okay, her feet stop, I got it. So delay saying it. And if your dog sits, that's awesome, because now they have that on an automatic sit. Step 6, we start to add distractions. So even though the dog is in sit, I'm going to pay first, but I'm going to move without releasing. And then if the dog stays, I'm going to pay. So I add a distraction, I pay, add a distraction, I pay, and then I release, I pay. So the very first few times, you're really trying to build that sit with distractions. After that, level 7, we start to go into distance, so I can walk away from the dog and then release the dog, and then have the dog come back into my loose leash walking or heel position. Okay, so that's the end of loose leash walking. Now I'm going to take you through what heel position looks like and how to teach it. The easiest one, and this one you can do with dogs of all ages, even puppies that are, already walking on leash. You can begin doing a heel. The beginning way that we do this is we step back and we do a quarter turn. So it looks like a little dance. So I'm paying. So you're going to step back by their butt, and then you turn, quarter turn, and the dog, if the dog follows, you simply click and pay where you want the dog to be. So step back, quarter turn, click, and treat. Dog does not have to sit. It's just a position. So you're basically getting the dog to go into position no matter where you are. The other type of heel that we teach is called a heel around, and it's where we cue the dog to go around our body when they're facing us, and then we can get back into our walking position. So heel around. The last one is called a same side heel. And that's where we use a finger target. So you have to have a little bit of targeting. So 3 different ways to teach heel. We first start off with the step back quarter turn. We will have a link to this video. It's a private YouTube page that if you want to see this video again and practice it, we'll have a video available to you so that you can take a look. Puppy empowerment training. So some of my clients that are on here today, you can see, we talk about using a long leash. So when you first have a puppy in your, or a dog that's new and you're exposing them to a new environment, highly recommend using a 15-foot leash and not focusing on loose leash walking. You first want to take them into the yard and let them get exposed to the grass and the bushes and the trees. If you just go out there and start to try to ask for obedience, you're most likely going to be shut down because your dog is going to want to go and sniff. So giving them some time to go sniff on a long leash like this can just empower them and make them feel like they've got choices. So long leash training, we call this puppy empowerment training, and there's a lot that goes into it, but basically having a relaxed leash, letting them explore, can give your dog a lot of confidence. It helps boost up their confidence. It helps them boost their socialization skills, and then not be so, like, oh my God, am I missing something? What's out there? We find that if you're able to do some of this training when your dog is young, they're less likely to bolt out the front door because they've been there, done that. So this one is really funny. I actually enjoyed recording this video, but this is problem behavior prevention and counter surfing. A lot of our puppies that were super small and cute are now growing up and they can put their paws up on the counter. So if we talk about management, we really want to stress that management would mean that you're not putting food on the table or on your countertop. You're maybe blocking off that area so that it can't happen, right? That's how you manage your dog not getting into the kitchen, not knowing what's ever on the counter because they can't get there. But after you've managed it, we actually have to figure out what's an alternative behavior besides putting your paws up there to see what's there. And for my dog and for dogs that I have in board, you're gonna see I have dog beds everywhere, and that dog bed is kind of like the place to go. So in this video, we demonstrate Bentley getting up on the counter, which is the problem behavior. Instead, we teach go to, I say go to your bed, but you can do place, stay, spot. And if he goes to his place or bed, I might reward him there. So how it normally goes is you would ignore unwanted behavior, you would prevent it, and then you would train an alternative behavior. So when he goes in the kitchen and he lays down in his bed, he's normally saying, hey mom, can I have something? And that's a more polite way to communicate instead of counter surfing and trying to check what's out there. So if you want to incorporate that type of training, it's not that hard. A lot of our dogs already have that on cue: spot, place, go to your bed. It's just I wanted you to think about how to resolve those problems yourself or prevent them. So I'm going to go through and see if we have any questions. If not, I will close out this for now and take a little break. And then we have a 6:30 class that is basically going to be for the Rowdy Rover. It's a repeat of a lot of this stuff, but we're going to be talking to a different group of people, I think. So let's see. So I really don't have any questions. There doesn't look like any dialogue. So I'm going to go ahead and how do we encourage the dog to go to bed? So teaching your dog to go to bed is a place settle. Those are all kind of the same way of teaching. Let me see if I have a short video that I can show. I've got a little bit of time left. Give me a second and I will pull up a video. Like lay on their bed versus other spots. Okay. So we use place and spot and bed as a place that's already in the house. So if you have a carpet or a bath, bath mat, or in this case, I have a dog bed, I've already labeled that what it is. So that's Bentley's bed. If I say spot, he looks for a carpet. If there's 3 of them, I have to point to which carpet I want him to go to. I'm gonna show you a video on how we teach it, but I'm just telling you, like, we can label each thing. Go to your crate, go to your bed, go to your spot. And then settle is something that is a little different. Settle is not usually on the floor, and it's something that we lay out like a blanket, and it's portable. So settle to us from Canine Learning Academy, we usually use settle. That means go lay down, relax, it's gonna be a while. Where spot, place, and go to your bed, we can use like, hey, there's someone at the door, go to your spot. Or in this case, Bentley wanted to go to his bed because he wanted something from the kitchen. So it's his way of telling me, hey, I want something, Mom, please. Rather than lunging and barking and all of those things, that's the behavior that I've taught him. I'm gonna show you now a video on the beginning of what that looks like. Let me see. I hope that answers your question. Tell me if that did or didn't. Okay, let's see. Finished videos. All right. Okay, so let me share the screen. So you go back and share screen. I think that's it. Okay, can you see that screen? Yes, so we will work on learning those. So yeah, I will send you the step 1, step 2, step 3 for teaching go to a spot or place, and I can implement a video next week. So hi, I'm Yo from Canine Learning. Let me turn this video off. The volume down. So I'm going to fast forward. Okay, so this is the beginning of how we teach pretty much going to a spot, a place, or a bed. It all looks exactly the same. It's just, to us, it's a little different. To most probably humans, it's all the same. But we like to say that if they go to their bed, they have to lay down. If they settle, they have to relax and be there for a while. So to start, whatever the object is that you want them to go to, you want to make it interesting so you can walk on over to it and simply look at it. That might be one way. In this case, I picked it up because we're outside, so it's kind of strange to have this rug laying there. So I picked it up, I put it down, I look at it, and then if the dog is engaging with it at all, even looking at it, I'm going to mark, and then I'm going to toss the reinforcement, in this case it's a treat, away from it so it drives the dog back. So we're doing lots of repetitions of just getting their different parts of their body on the settle mat. So here's what this looks like. So I'm clicking here and then I'm tossing. And if the dog comes right back, I'm going to go ahead and click. So we normally go eye contact, movement towards 1 paw, 2 paw, 3 paws, 4, sit, down, duration. So that's our steps. So there's the sit, I already clicked. This dog actually knows the behavior, so I'm clicking sooner so they doesn't go all the way into the position. But here's the down. And the reason we toss the food is so that we can keep resetting the dog. Now, if your dog disappears after they go get food, it means that the settle mat has lost its interest, so you might need to pick it back up and then present it again. So here is me picking it up. And in this case, we're now starting to add duration. So that went all the way into a down, and now we start to add duration. And then in this case, I'm already adding distance, so I'm showing like how we do clockwork for distance. All right. So hopefully that answers your question, maybe. But I'll try to put that together in a little, like a PDF file or a video, and put it on our page. So thank you guys for joining. And again, this will be on our Facebook Live, and I'll have a link to this so that you can take a look at it later. All right. Have a great, what day is it? Tuesday. Talk to you later.